Welcome to Critical Weight Theory, where today I'm going to once again use my civic voice, and my podcast is going to explore some of the foundations of democracy, civil liberties, and the evolving political landscape, or you might say de evolving political landscape. But today I'm going to talk about the ACLU and why I recently donated $5 to them. I know right now, with the way things are going, it might seem like we don't even have a legal system anymore, right? It seems like, eventually things will just be resolved through fighting in the streets and whatnot. But technically, there is a legal system still, and that's why I'm still willing to, support the ACLU, because they can still potentially make a difference through the court system. So I'm your host, Wade, and today we're diving into an important discussion. Can political groups support liberal ideas or ideals and civil liberties like due process and the presumption of innocence in today's political climate, or this crazy situation that we're in? So let's examine this complex and timely issue in a relatively quick manner. So, the American legal and political framework is built on fundamental principles that are supposed to protect individual rights while shaping the course of governance. A key example is the 14th Amendment, which guarantees that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are entitled to equal protection under the law. And over the years, that has even been broadened to maintain that even people who were not born in the United States are entitled to some basic human rights. This principle underpins many debates about civil rights and government authority, even though some people are trying to just swat that whole premise aside. Again, remember, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. And again, it's been broadened to include even people who were not born in the United States, but who are entitled to some basic human rights considerations. One of the core tenets of democracy is the presumption of innocence, innocent until proven guilty. This principle dates back to Roman law, and technically, I'm sure, further than that. And it means the burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused. But in today's political climate, do all groups uphold these ideals consistently? No, of course not. And that's why we still need organizations like the ACLU. And, when I was sort of plotting this episode out, I was going to include, other organizations, but I narrowed it down to the ACLU because a few of the so called libertarian think tanks are actually in favor of government privatization. And that's actually, by this point, one of the main threats to, the legal system and even the presumption of innocence. Because if you are trying to privatize society and make everything about money, well, you don't necessarily need principles because everything's about the almighty dollar. So this is more about civil liberties and how they align with the core values that this country claims to be founded on, right? In the civics textbooks and the history textbooks and a lot of the rhetoric that comes out of politicians' mouths, they claim that we do have civil liberties, even still. So many political groups and organizations strive to balance progressive ideals with foundational civil liberties. And one of the prime examples is indeed the American Civil Liberties Union, which is what the ACLU stands for. While often associated with progressive causes, the ACLU is deeply committed to protecting due process, free speech, and the right to a free trial. The ACLU has, you know, uh, existed since 1920, which means they're over 100 years old. So they've actually become an institution and they've stood the test of time. And they have definitely faced some challenges during that long time. And one of the famous quotes from, I believe, the founder of the ACLU, or one of the co founders, is so long as we have enough people in this country willing to fight for their rights, we'll be called a democracy. And that's basically true. We can really only be a democracy, a functional democracy, if people have rights and if people are still willing to fight for them. And let's hope more of that fighting involves relatively safe places to fight, as in courtrooms, and they don't all end up being resolved in street skirmishes or outright wars. So the ACLU's work extends across the political spectrum, actually, defending individuals against government overreach, wrongful conviction, and violations of constitutional rights. They're actually more apolitical than they are sometimes given credit for. And, this really underscores the idea that civil liberties transcend party lines. So when people say they are just a progressive organization or what have you, or even that they're like a bunch of communists or whatever, it's basically a lie because they have a history of defending all sorts of people's rights, whether they are left of center or even on the right. So the role of technology in civil liberties is another interesting development, of course, over the run of the organization. In our digital age, communication platforms have transformed how we engage with civil rights discussions. The internet provides numerous ways for people to communicate, meaning emails, texts, and social media. They're critical tools for activism, discourse, and mobilization. So that's why we need these types of organizations to try to protect the right of people to speak freely online. And, these platforms present challenges. You've got misinformation, censorship, and privacy concerns. And in most cases I'm aware of, the ACLU has stood on the correct side of those issues, at least in my opinion. Organizations like the ACLU, as well as certain other advocacy groups, continue to fight for, you know, digital rights, ensuring that the presumption of innocence and free expression remain intact in an era of rapid technological advancement. Or, I suppose, if you want to look at it from a more cynical perspective, you might say technological social decline. Um, so, for my closing thoughts here, there's always this question of where do we go from here? The balance between political ideals and civil liberties is an ongoing debate, but one thing is clear: protecting due process and fundamental freedoms is essential for a healthy democracy. You don't really have democracy, again, if you don't have rights. And if one of the main things you can accomplish through voting is to deprive others of rights, especially the most fundamental rights, well, you're not really having a democracy. You're having something masquerading as one. So, as citizens, staying informed and holding institutions accountable is our responsibility. So, again, that's why I donated a small amount to the ACLU. And, you don't need to donate a bunch of money to them. It's up to you if you donate at all. But you should at least consider doing so, especially in this day and age where even a small effort can still have a big impact. So, thanks for joining me in this little discussion. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts on social media. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep advocating for a just society. And thanks again.